So I guess the ultimate question here is, did I like it? And I guess you could say that. Welcome to the first episode, well, first new episode. I did do an episode of the show a long time ago, but we're not going to talk about that, all right? Anyways, this is a show where I'm going to take a look at TV shows in their entirety. I know that might seem a bit reductive and maybe not something that I can necessarily do in 30 to 40 minutes, but it's something I've always wanted to do because I watch a lot of TV and I figure I might as well get something productive out of all of that time. And if this episode had a name, it would pretty much just be, I watched all of Game of Thrones in a week, so I'm legally allowed to talk about it. Because that's what I did. Yeah, I spent pretty much my entire spring break just watching Game of Thrones, and for good reason, I think. As somebody who watches a lot of TV and takes a lot of popular culture, Game of Thrones has always been sort of one of my biggest cultural holes. At the time, what most people consider to be the best stuff was airing. I was watching other stuff like Breaking Bad and Mad Men, or I was just playing video games. I don't know what I was doing. I was in high school. Jesus. What do you think you would think of me now? You know, seeing me here in this cape. What do you think of the cape, by the way? Anyways, it's been something I've been meaning to get around to for a long time. Like, anyone who knows me will know I'll say, maybe this is the week I watch Game of Thrones. Like, maybe this winter break is when I start Game of Thrones. I've probably said that like 12 times in the past 6 years or whatever. And, well, I finally did it. And I'm pretty thankful I did because, you know, I get it now. This has been one of the biggest shows, if not the biggest show of all time, like as far as like scripted narrative drama is concerned. And yeah, I think I get it. Although I was actually pretty surprised to see what the show really was. It ended up being something, while still epic and world-spanning, like, was something that was far more intimate than I expected. Oh, Jesus Christ, this thing is, like, really hot, actually. It's very hot in this apartment, and this thing is warm, and I'm wearing this sweat. Look, it's very warm in here, and so don't be surprised if this thing disappears. I'll try to keep it up, but Anyways, this thing was way more intimate than I expected it to be. I knew that it was about big battles and the large politicking surrounding some of those battles, but I didn't realize that it was going to kind of just be about like 5 people, like maybe 3 or 4 groups of people, and that's it. Like, you always see people posting the house banners or wearing them on t-shirts or putting them on bad bumper stickers or hanging them in their dorm room windows. And so I thought there were a lot more big players in this story, but it ended up just being smaller houses serving like 2 or 3 bigger houses the whole time. And because this show is so culturally big, there are a lot of spoilers that I just kind of knew through cultural osmosis. But the thing about them is, even though I knew kind of who was going to die by the time I was done watching this show, was that I was really surprised with where those events happened, if that makes sense. I knew the Red Wedding was going to happen. I kind of had a gist of who died at the Red Wedding, but I didn't really have context for why that was important or why that was so like world shattering at the time. Like, I remember Twitter when the Red Wedding happened and just like people like crying and screaming. But I didn't really get why. I just knew a lot of important characters were dead. I knew that Joffrey died, but I didn't know just how early he died. And so like some of these developments like left me just kind of wondering like, well, what the fuck is this show actually about? And you know, like, secretly, maybe the people who are running the show might not know what the show is about as we go into the last season here, but look, I'm not here to poo-poo Game of Thrones. I really liked it. But we will talk about some of that stuff, so don't worry. Watching this for the first time, I was also obviously comparing this to other shows that I consider to be my favorite shows. I know that's kind of like a weird, toxic thing to do, but, you know, a lot of people cite this as their favorite show and maybe even the best show ever made, and so I was really interested to see how it stacked up. And while it's not necessarily my favorite show, I am in love with it. This thing has burrowed a hole into my brain and it dug in like some kind of parasite and it won't leave, and it's all I've been able to think about for the past couple of weeks is like just fucking weird Game of Thrones trivia shit. Like, for example, I'm not a lore guy at all in a lot of ways. Like, I play a lot of video games and, you know, I'm a generally nerdy guy. I mean, I'm wearing a fucking cape, right? So that's all you really need to know about me. So, you know, I'm a generally nerdy guy, but I'm never really that interested in lore. But here, it was so well integrated into the show and just into the conversations people had, and I learned a lot about the world without having to go to the wiki, that I became interested in it because I came out of the show just knowing a lot of it. I watched the show alongside a couple of friends, and I'll be damned if we didn't spend many nights up until like 3 or 4 in the morning just on Discord, like talking about weird Game of Thrones lore and shit, and like getting out the map of Westeros and charting character paths, because that was fun for us. Ultimately, that's what Game of Thrones is to me, and what I think it will end up being for me. Never something that was really too thought-provoking, but something that was just fun to watch and fun to be surprised by. And I think the fun of Game of Thrones is its most important aspect. You know, I've never seen a show utilize spectacle like Game of Thrones has, ever. And so it was just super easy for me to get caught up in the politics of it and waiting for the build up to the next big battle. Because of this and because of how much fun I was having just watching characters interact and meet and fight and die, it was super easy for me to watch a whole season on accident in a day. Like, I was really willing to put 10 hours on the couch in just because I wanted to see what happened next. Game of Thrones, I've come to realize, is pretty much the master of the cliffhanger. I don't know if I've seen many other shows that leave cliffhangers that aren't cheap and also leave you really wanting to see what happens next. Like, they're not cutting off the story of an episode just to create a cliffhanger. It felt like a natural ending point for that hour of television, but the next hour was going to be just as, if not more, interesting. Almost every time. And coming into the show knowing that it's considered one of the best television shows of all time and will likely go down in history as that, even if the finales end up being like not great, coming into this, I was, you know, obviously going to be like, okay, well, let's see how this thing actually holds up. And like, as I got more invested, like, there were many moments where I just sat up in my seat and went like, Game of Thrones, right? Like, fuck yeah, I get it. Hell yeah. Couple important moments like that where, you know, Daenerys getting the Unsullied was probably one of the earliest moments where I was like, oh, hell yeah, like, this show is really fucking cool, even though I've got some thoughts about Daenerys' plotline. The most important for me, though, was Hardhome. Even though season 5 is largely considered like the worst season with all like the Dorne stuff, and I get it, I really get it. Hardhome for me might be one of my favorite episodes, if not my favorite, just because of the way it completely recontextualizes all of the politicking that has been so important in Game of Thrones. I thought Hardhome was so fantastic just because you realize like, oh, holy shit, yeah, like, none of this matters at all. All these characters we've seen die and fight and betray each other, like, none of that fucking matters because these zombies are coming from the north. And, like, out of all the tragedies in Game of Thrones, that's, like, weirdly the most tragic thing, in a way, that people like Robb and Ned and whoever else, right, has given their lives for nothing. Even Ned, in the first episode, like, espouses that, but we're not going to get too deep into specific character beat. I don't got time for that. All this politicking and stuff that happens does kind of lead me to wonder, like, why this show in particular, out of all of the shows, why is it Game of Thrones that caught on with the masses? Not that I want to sound like pretentious or elitist, but, you know, like, yeah, why do the dumb people like Game of Thrones too? Is it like the nudity and the violence and stuff? Because there's quite a bit of that early on, but it kind of subsides. So, I don't know. Is that why people don't like the show as it goes on? No, I don't think so. I think there's some legitimate criticisms as the show goes on and sort of starts slashing plot lines, but But yeah, you know, why this show? Why a show that most people who start watching it are like, well, I have to keep notes because there are too many characters, I can't keep up with them all. And like, realistically, there's not that many characters, but as you watch, you really pick it up very quickly. But, you know, why this one? I don't know, is it the battles? There's only ever like one battle a season. Quick side note about the nudity and stuff. I'm not like, I don't, like it's whatever. But there's this one episode of South Park, and South Park is a show that sort of, as I age, I kind of hate a little bit more, and like the new seasons especially so. and I don't want to give it too much airtime because of that, but there's this episode of South Park where they go to George R. R. Martin's house and they sing this song about wieners or something.
Wiener, 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 next to another wiener. Wiener, wiener, two wieners alongside yet another wiener party.
And like, that's so weird to me because there's only like 5 or 6 wieners I can think of. And there's so many countless nude female bodies that it's just like this obviously weirdly unsubtle homophobia. I don't know. And I hate it. It makes me hate that episode super bad in retrospect, having actually watched Game of Thrones at this point. So, like I said, there are a lot of characters in this show, and I think the characters sort of define this show. So without further ado, let's take a look at the homie list.
And the dead come with it.
The homie list is just like my list of characters who I really like and kind of want to talk about and I think have interesting things to say. Not all of them are homies. You'll see that very quickly, but yeah, these are just the characters that I think deserve some mention. That really struck my fancy, if you know what I mean. I don't think that's the saying. Strike my fancy, is that the phrase? I don't know. I have a cape. I should be able to speak a lot more eloquently with this thing on. Kicking off the homie list is Tyrion Lannister. He's my favorite character in the show. I just enjoy watching him interact with every other character. I love every scene he's in, every plotline he's in. There's just something really special about him. Peter Dinklage obviously knocks it out of the park. That's like beating a dead horse saying that. But, you know, I've never really connected with him as an actor. I've seen him in stuff like Avengers or bad bit parts and other stuff. But, you know, seeing him here is like, oh, I get why people really like Peter Dinklage now. Arya Stark is the homie, big caps. Her plotline was probably one of the most interesting to me up until it kind of jumped the shark a little bit. But throughout, I was really interested in seeing what Arya was up to, especially when she was like rolling around with the Hound and just kind of like being a witcher and like fighting crime, or when she was training with the faceless gods to become like an assassin and stuff. That stuff was really, really neat, and I loved it the whole way through until yeah, that might have been the moment. Robb is a homie. Not a lot to say there. I really liked Robb Stark. He you know, just couldn't keep it in his pants. So, sorry, Robb. Varys is like kind of a homie. I just loved seeing him and Tyrion interact mostly, especially like when they went to Dorne after Tyrion escapes. Just him being like sassy and Tyrion being drunk, or just Varys saying like weird stuff to people. Like when Ned Stark is in the dungeon and he's just like,
they taught me that each man has a role to play. The same is true at court. I am the master of whisperers. My role is to be sly, obsequious, and without scruples. I am a good actor, my lord.
Can you free me from this pet?
I could. But will I? No.
like that's a really great character moment for him, and I'm kind of sad that they've sort of don't know what to do with him, a lot like they did with Littlefinger.
You stand accused of murder. You stand accused of treason. How do you answer these charges? Lord Baelish.
Like, I'm afraid they're just going to kill him off without kind of revealing more of what Varys' plan ultimately was. Because these guys, they're fast-tracking the thing, and they don't really have time for politicking much anymore, because the war against the dead is here, you know, and Varys doesn't really fit into that, I guess. So that's kind of sad for me, because I can't really imagine them using him interestingly after what they did to Littlefinger. Reek deserved it. Fuck Theon, you know. A lot of people probably are like, holy shit, he got like super tortured. And it's like, yeah, well, you know, imagine being Robb, just coming home and being like, what the fuck, Theon? I sent you to like go to the grocery store and you burned down my fucking house. Dany, Daenerys, I thought she was pretty boring. Emilia Clarke is an actress who I've never been particularly fond of. I've never really liked her in anything I've ever seen her in. I don't think she's ever really like blew me away, you know? So here I don't think she's much better. And I thought a lot of her plotline was kind of boring. Like she just kind of like walked around with her dragons and was like, I'm gonna go take Westeros every episode. Like that was all her stuff was. It was kind of one note. I felt like not a lot of surprises. And I get that might upset some people or whatever, but yeah, Dany's just kind of boring. I don't know, she's just kind of there. She's whatever. Fuck Stannis. Fuck Ollie. Ollie deserved it. Cersei, I think she's okay. She's compelling enough as a villain. She's competent enough as a menacing figure. But I think she's also becoming kind of more one note as the show advances into this fast-tracked sort of plot line. She's just sort of evil and she'll kill people if they are mean to her, and she's just mean. I don't know. I thought she was fine, and she serves her position in the show well. I think Lena Headey acts the character really well. I think she's super well portrayed, but other than that, I don't know. Cersei's fine. More interesting than, I don't know, some of the other villains on the show, but she's just there. Kind of one note also, I felt like. Jorah, just stop, man. She's not into you. Sam and Gilly, homies. Yeah, homies. They're just classic. I love Sam and Gilly. I love seeing them interact. I love every scene with either of them in it. So, Bran is, he sucks, honestly. Bran's really fucking boring. If you look at the show as a whole, his stuff doesn't get interesting until after Hodor dies. So, I don't know, like for the most of the show, he's just kind of like walking around with Rickon, and who the fuck cares about Rickon?
Don't just stand there, do something!
Help. Police. Murder.
Although I do love in season 7 how he's just kind of got this like disaffected, like I just got back from a festival where I did psychedelics for the first time vibe.
Your father's last living true-born son. You're Lord of Winterfell now.
I can never be Lord of Winterfell. I can never be Lord of anything. I'm the three-eyed raven.
What the fuck does that mean? Brienne of Tarth? Homie. Oh my god. I didn't realize how much I was going to really like Brienne of Tarth going into this show. But man, Gwendolyn Christie, she killed it. You know, I really loved her in this, and it makes me really sad that they totally misused her, miscast her in the Star Wars sequels. Like, I knew because of like cultural osmosis that was like kind of a bad thing that they cast her as Captain Phasma and then like threw her in a toilet and then threw her off a cliff or whatever. But I didn't really understand just to how far of a degree of bad decision. I can't think of the right word. There is a single word in my head. Sin. It's not sin. I'll post. Hey there. It's me, God. I'm editing the video right now. And at this point, I was supposed to come up with the word that I was thinking of. And still, I can't think of the word. It's actually becoming physically painful within my throat. The fact that I can't come up with the word. So, fill in your own word. There was going to be a little joke there. A little joke for you guys. But I can't come up with it. So, I'm sorry. Back to the video. It was bad. JJ, why did you do that, man? Ryan Johnson, why did you do that, man? We're not going to talk about Star Wars on the internet anymore. I'm done. How about this cape, though, huh? Still going. Still got it on. Bronn is a homie. You need a friend like Bronn in your life. He's just awesome. Him and Tyrion, awesome. The scene where him and Tyrion send Podrick to the brothel and he comes back with the money or whatever, that scene is so great. I love the three of them. That was such a great scene. I just love Bronn. He's on the homie list because he's a homie, you know? Jaime Lannister, I wish was a homie. I wish he would stop fucking around and become a homie. You know, it seemed like he was going to do that at the end of season 7 or whatever when he got on the horse and rode away. But yeah, I wish Jaime would become a homie and stop fucking his sister. That's the end of the homie list. So we'll just kind of talk about some of the more interesting, broader stuff. The most interesting storylines to me were everything north of the Wall with Jon and the wildlings and the zombies and stuff, especially, like Hard Home. I mentioned my affinity for Hard Home earlier. And then Arya until she gets... Or any storyline that involved Tyrion. I really loved the stuff with him on trial and then him escaping. That whole section of that season was really, really fantastic after Joffrey was murdered. The trial, obviously, I think he won an Emmy for that. It's fantastic. Most boring stuff to me was Dorne in season 5, obviously. Sand Snakes suck, that whole thing, bleh. And then Daenerys, just kind of in general. I already sort of went over my thoughts on her plot line, but yeah, I thought it was super one note. And also a little weird that it's this white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl going around to all of these slave cities filled with brown people and being I will free you, and then all of them following her and calling her mother. Also, a little weird. Maybe that's some George R.R. Martin stuff that I have to kind of reconcile with, but yeah, little weird on that one. My prediction for season 8, I don't think anyone's going to end up on the Iron Throne. I don't really know how we get there, but that's sort of what I'm feeling. Again, I'm sad that characters like Varys are taking a back seat for a plotline that's getting sort of sped up, and they don't really seem to know what to do with it other than to just make them fight the zombies. So, that's... I had my fun with Game of Thrones. I really want to see how it ends. But do I think it's going to end as spectacularly as some of the other earlier seasons did? No. But I think I'll be happy with it. As long as Tyrion survives, we're good. We're good. We're good. I'm just hoping for something satisfying ultimately, because that's really all you can hope for. I wouldn't call myself a fucking bandwagon fan for Game of Thrones. I watched the whole thing, but, there are a lot of people who have staked years on this rather than weeks. So, I hope, especially for them, that, this turns out really great. Because I really enjoyed my time with it, and I would like to see it end well, and I'd like other people to be happy. Before we go, random extra stuff I liked that I couldn't really find a specific place for, but I just wanted to mention. This is kind of like the homie list, but just the homie moments. I don't know. I don't like that. I almost kind of don't like the word homie, for me. The Orson's Beatles scene might be my favorite scene in the show. No, that's not true. There's a lot of scenes I really like, but Orson's Beatles I would put in a top 3 or top 5 sort of list if I had to make one. I just really enjoyed it, and when you look at it, and a lot of people are like, what does this thing mean? And I didn't really know what it meant either, but I knew when I was watching it, I sat up in my chair, and I was like, there's something very special about this. And it was 2 characters I really enjoyed having a weird kind of conversation that seemed sort of metaphorical. I didn't really grasp it, but it's a scene that I will be thinking about for a long time after this is all out of my brain.
Father droned on about the family legacy, and I thought about Orson's Beatles. I read the histories of Targaryen conquest. Did I hear dragon wings? No, I heard k. And I still couldn't figure out why he was doing it. And I had to know, because it was horrible that all these beetles should be dying for no reason.
Every day around the world, men, women, and children are murdered by the score. Who gives a dusty fuck about a bunch of beetles?
I know, but still, it filled me with dread. Piles and piles of them, years and years of them. How many countless living, crawling things, smashed and dried out and returned to the dirt. In my dreams, I found myself standing on a beach made of beetle husks, stretching as far as the eye could see. I woke up crying, weeping for their shattered little bodies. I tried to stop Orson once.
He was twice your size.
He just pushed me aside with a coup and kept on smashing. Every day, until that mule kicked him in the chest and killed him. So what do you think? Why did he do it? What was it all about?
That face Jamie makes every time someone says they know he's fucking his sister is pretty good. They'll be laughing or whatever, just ah. Anyways, I know you fuck your sister.
And their eyes on you, cunt.
Not my type.
Not blonde enough.
Every time the man with no name or no face or whatever, Jack in a Karn, right? Every time he's there, just love him as a character. He's great. I love that storyline, like I said. So, the capes, I made that as a specific thing on this list. I'm not a cape guy, but man, there are some very good capes in Game of Thrones, especially the first stuff up here. I don't know what it is, very aesthetically pleasing to me. I would be lying if I didn't say I'm going to put this on and just walk around with it in my house, because I can't wear it in public. Everyone in the show drinks a lot. Like, it's kind of weird, but I love it. Like, Tyrion, just like, literally every scene he's in, he pours a drink, I think. And I don't know how these people aren't dead. I assume they drink something more with a higher alcohol content than what a lot of us drink these days. And so, you know, just kind of weird. People smoke a lot in Mad Men, and you're like, holy shit, they're smoking so much. But in this, they drink probably 10 times more than anyone smokes in Mad Men. This shot. The score from the season 6 finale, just fucking wow. Really, the score for the whole show, I didn't really mention it, and I'd be remiss not to. It's great, you know, it's fantastic. There's not a lot to say. He did great work on Westworld, also, which became like a horrible mess, and maybe we'll talk about that on this show someday, but I'd like to do shows that I like first. Yeah, the score, fantastic throughout Game of Thrones. I feel like that's like an obvious thing to say, but figured I should say it. This shot. This line.
Why do you want to help him?
I have a tender spot in my heart for cripples, bastards, and broken things.
Don't know why on that one. I just really like it a lot. Maybe because it's like a Tyrion thing. I don't know. This next one is super a Tyrion thing, but also like a weird... This scene.
Intimate, lovely table.
I get that it's like the most on-the-nose characterization for all of those characters, like the order they take chairs in and where they sit at the chairs, and Tyrion just being like, fuck it, I'm doing my own thing and dragging it across. Like, I get it's super on the nose, but I just super loved it. It's one of those things that really stuck out in my mind. The rock song that plays when Jaime's hand gets cut, like that cover of that In-Universe song.
This should help you remember.
Like I said, a lot of stuff got spoiled for me, but Jaime getting his hand cut off is one of those things that Super did not, because I guess it's not really that important in the long scheme of things. Like, who really cares that Jaime loses his hand? I just thought that's such an interesting character motivation. Like, I knew he had like sort of a semi-redemption arc eventually, but I didn't know the impotence for it, and so I really liked the hand getting cut off stuff. This scene in season 7.
Maybe it still is.
Welcome, my lords. Your friends arrived before you did. I've been sent to escort you all to the meeting.
Pleasant surprise in an unpleasant situation.
Now, I get that people have a lot of criticisms of season 7, and a lot of them are pretty valid, But this stuff is, I think, what made some of it worth it at the very least. You know, like, this is our Avengers moment, right? Like, everyone meeting up finally. All of these characters coming together. I get there probably might have been a more eloquent way to get some of these characters together other than just having them all come to the same room. But I absolutely love seeing these characters interact after watching them for 60, 70 hours. I can't even imagine how it felt after watching the show for like 8 or 9 years. Especially the bit where they're all walking down the dirt road. There's just so much great interaction and dialogue in that thing that, man, it must have been so easy to write, but it was just, you could tell this is where they've been trying to get the whole time, and it really showed that they really cared about that scene a lot. But I'm just repeating myself about that scene, but I can't list everything that I loved about watching Game of Thrones here. Like I said, it was one of my big cultural holes, but I'm really happy I finally got around to doing it because I think it was really worth it. As far as like a single binge, I said it's super easy, and like there are some shows that are way shorter than this that I feel like felt longer than this. Granted, I had like a week to just do whatever the fuck I wanted, so I just spent it watching Game of Thrones, like with no other stuff I had to be doing. But it was 70 hours of television still, and I felt like it went by smooth as ice. Anyways, if you are one of the few people who has still not decided whether or not to watch Game of Thrones, and you for some reason decided to watch this whole video, I highly recommend it, because you'll want to buy a cape too. That's how much I fell in love with this thing. I could literally talk about Game of Thrones for another 2 or 3 hours, and I probably will find a way to at some point, maybe when the series ends in a couple weeks. But yeah, I'm happy I did it, and I'm happy I get it now. Thank you for watching. Maybe we'll watch something a bit shorter next time, huh?
There was a bear there, all black and brown and covered in hair. 3 boys, a goat, and a dancing bear. They danced so smart.